Hello everyone, welcome back to our new podcast, Leading Women in Hospitality. Today we have Melissa from easyJet joining us. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Pretty good. It's Friday, so looking forward to the weekend.
Time's ticking to that weekend now.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa, for those that don't know you already, do you mind just giving us a bit of an introduction to who you are?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Melissa Skluzacek. I am currently the Director of Trading and Revenue Management at easyJet, based in Luton. I have been with easyJet now for about 3.5 years. So I guess my claim to fame is I joined easyJet and moved from the US to the UK in January of 2020. So basically had about 6 weeks of normal working, and then the airline industry sort of fell apart for a few years while we went through COVID. So it was a really interesting, even with my experience with revenue management, it was, completely trying to figure out what to do for, through all of it. So my role basically covers, I have a team of about 40 people, and I oversee the trading function, which is basically what trading is to us is that it's the traditional pricing and revenue management, where you have the people that are trying to maximize revenue for both ancillaries and tickets across all of the flights. But it also, acknowledges the more holistic nature of the field, where you really do need to, pricing is just one lever in how you maximize revenue across the organization. So it's really intended to reach out quite a bit to marketing, the digital teams, the network, scheduling, et cetera, to figure out strategies and tactical initiatives that allow you to pull all the different levers together to get to the right solution. And then I also have a more of the technical aspect, which is we call it revenue management optimization. So like the majority of airlines, we have a revenue management system. Ours happens to be homegrown. And this team is responsible for basically all of the parameters, the workings of the system. And we're really involved in basically with all of the additional data sources that are out there, how can we really improve our algorithms and business processes to incorporate more external data and just get better algorithms to continue to squeeze out more revenue.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so complex, the airline industry, and I know
yes.
So many people within revenue management or within hospitality as a whole, they're always so intrigued by airlines. So I think a lot of people are going to be really interested to hear a bit more about how it all works and kind of how you actually manage all of it, because it seems like a lot, right?
It is a lot, and one of the things we kind of laugh about in revenue management, when we can never give anyone a straight answer, because they'll ask us for things and it's always it depends, because there are so many different aspects to it and different flights and different times of year. Everything is just different, and it's very hard to sum up how things are going, because there's so many different things you want to share and you need to look at in order to really assess how a flight or a route or a market in general is doing.
Yeah, and do you feel like the systems have a big part to play in the decisions that you make, or kind of how would you say it all fits in together in that sense?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So really it is, and it's something that we feel really strongly about at easyJet and on my team, is it really is the people and the models working together. You can't have the model just off doing its own thing and just hoping for the best. The model can only cover so much. There's a lot of things that go into whether or not someone's going to purchase a flight and the price they're willing to pay. So we feel very strongly that the team needs to work very closely with the models to come up with the best solution. So it's a combination of the two. Now, having said that, you're optimizing flights, we're on sale for generally about a year in advance. And so if you think about, we fly 1,800 to 2,000 flights a day, multiply that by 365, that's a lot of flights that we're constantly dynamically optimizing. So you do need to have a pretty strong reliance on the system to do most of the heavy lifting. So it's about the analyst understanding what works well with the models and what the model can do well, what the model's shortcomings are, so they can enhance each other. And then a lot about alerting as well to kind of manage by exception.
Mm-hmm. I was actually at our roundtable event yesterday, and we were talking about AI and systems, and I think there's a lot, it's a kind of like the buzzword in the industry at the moment, isn't it? A little bit kind of, is it going to take over everybody's jobs? But as you mentioned, I feel like maybe they can help us to make the decisions, but ultimately you're always going to need that human interaction and that strategic and commercial mindset to actually progress the business.
Exactly. And I mean, there's so much that we can do with statistical and economic models. And there's so much opportunity to continue to improve on that area. But I think we're pretty safe from being completely automated yet, because there really is, there's an art to it as well. And so people that are super needing to have exact answers, this is not the right field for you, because there is this is what the model said, this is what the historical data and other data sources are telling me, but there's also such a big aspect of just knowing your market and understanding your customers and experimenting and just trying new things. And because the model cannot answer it just can't account for everything, and we're part of our data. So our actions influence how the flight's going to do. So, again, that's a hard modeling technique.
It's actually quite refreshing to hear, because it's nice to know that we're all still needed and there's still jobs.
We are. It's just the key thing is to have, and this is something I'm very passionate about. It's model explainability. You can create some very complex models, and the more black box they are, the harder they are for revenue management, because you have to be able to explain why you're getting the prices that you're getting, and you have to know, there's things that go beyond just what the model output is. There's corporate objectives, there's the business strategy, etc., where you have to be able to interact with the models. And if you don't know how they work, it's really hard to make that decision. And I tell people too, I can't go to the, I can't go to the chief executive and say, oh, the models came up with that pricing. I don't know. I have, I'm accountable for the pricing. So that includes the model and the decisions we make to adjust the model.
I guess going back a little bit then, Melissa, kind of what's your journey? How did you get to the position that you're in now?
Yeah, so obviously I'm not from the UK, so I started my career journey in the US. So I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I have been doing this revenue management for interestingly about 30 years now, so a really long time. And in the world of everyone talking about squiggly careers and stuff, mine is probably the least squiggly career you'll ever see. It wasn't by design, and there's so many different approaches to how you get your career, and I think it's important to find what works best for you. But I totally fell into it. So like most people graduating from university, I majored in math and economics at university. So I loved math, always knew I wanted to do something with math, but I had no clue what revenue management was. I had never heard of it. And a large airline was, headquartered near my parents' house, and they were looking for people with math degrees, and I got a job. And it, so it wasn't since I've been 14 years old, I thought revenue management was for me. And working for an airline, I got to fly for free. So when you're 21 years old, and you got to fly in first class. So it was, I remember I got the job and I was flying internationally in first class at 21 years old, drinking champagne, and I'm like, God, this is amazing. Yeah. And then luckily I really liked the job. I liked the combination of well, math and economics, because that's really what revenue management is. And then it hits on so many different areas of it. I actually, the company that I worked for right out of university, I got furloughed after 4 months because they did a massive, we call them layoffs. We did massive layoffs for the company. And so I kind of look at that as more of an internship than anything, but luckily, because the airline, and it is kind of a niche field, and the airline industry is pretty tight, I got another job. And this is part of my career, you'll see, has been a bit about, I never thought I would move out of Minneapolis, but you'll see as my career, a lot of it, how I've gotten to where I've gotten, has been willing to move to where the job is. So I then got a job with Southwest Airlines, again in revenue management, moved to Texas, never in a million years thought I would live in Texas, and ended up staying in Texas for 7 years. And then, you know, really just sort of learned in my job and progressed that way. I got, you know, promoted to manager after a while. And then I guess I spoke at a conference and about training revenue management people, and a company, an airline, recruited me because they really liked my presentation. So again, I moved and got a much higher position. So I've done revenue management in a variety of different levels of leadership, you know, throughout my career, hence the verticalness of it. And really it's been a product of networking. It's, you know, I can't actually, the vast majority of jobs I've received in my career, I haven't applied for. Someone contacted me. And it's because I knew people, I networked, I always left my jobs on very, very good terms. And in our industry, and because it's such a niche field, you're constantly running across the same people over and over again. So having a good reputation and leaving the job well is, you know, always, I tell people that is so very, very important. So, and again, that willingness to move throughout. When opportunities came. And I've had opportunities that, you know, obviously I'll turn down things if it's not the right time, but a lot of them have been things where I've been very happy in my current job, but this was sort of one of those things where you kind of had to take a leap and a risk. And if it was the right time to do it for my family and myself, I did it. And, you know, other than moving in the middle of COVID, it's worked out pretty well. And, you know, frankly, I've just loved being at easyJet. And even with COVID, the things that, you know, we've learned through it have been amazing.
And obviously you mentioned that you moved a lot in the US, but like you said, a big move to the UK then as well. How have you always found that transition throughout your career when you're not only starting a new job, you're living in a new town and kind of new markets, I guess, as well, that maybe you're looking at? How have you found that?
Yeah, and that, you know, that's something as it's interesting as you get older. So I now I'm married and I have 2 children that are 15 and 17. So when you're single, it's very easy to pick up and move. And yes, you have to meet new people and things like that. But the complexity of moving is just, it's not as difficult. When you're moving with a spouse that also has a job that they need to give up, and, you know, moving kids from different schools, it's a different situation. So you really do have to look carefully at it. So since my kids have been born, so like I said, my oldest is 17 now, they're on their third school. So they haven't, you know, we've stayed in places for like 8-9 years. And the move to the UK was twofold. It was, the nice thing about the airline industry is you can really work around the world because your skills are very niche, and because you know, there's airlines all over the world, and revenue management is revenue management to a large extent. And I wanted my kids to experience living in a different country and traveling, and it was a good time I had to think about when was the right time in their life as well to do it. And this was not that disruptive because they would have been changing to different schools anyway. And it just was sort of the right time we felt for them to do it. And again, when you add a partner into the mix, you have to think about what works for them as well. And fortunately, my husband was sort of ready to make a change too.
Well, timing wise for you all.
Yeah.
And how have you found with having children then, going to, I guess, a bit of a discussion around being a woman in the industry and having children, and obviously you've got your partner there now to support you, it sounds like, but how do you find the industry as a whole supporting women that have children? Do you feel that you were supported in that, or did that create challenges for you throughout your career?
I've always been really lucky that I've worked for good companies that, and honestly, it comes down to your boss a lot too, that have been really supportive and really flexible. So, I haven't had the challenges that I know other people have. One of the things in the US is you get a very short maternity leave. And basically you don't get any unless you can take a bit extra. And I had, again, I had really supportive bosses who were like working with me to make what would work. And again, the flexibility to do what I needed to do. And, my husband is also, it's very much a partnership. We both support each other in that way. So we share the burden of all of it. But it does present, again, having a family does present different challenges in your career, because you do have to, from a networking standpoint, especially when they're little, you can't necessarily just go out after work. You've got a family to take care of. Like I said, when you're thinking about moving and other things, you have to consider your kids. And then, frankly, raising them is a super high priority, obviously, and their well-being and making sure that they're getting what they need is something you always have to consider. So like I said, I've been super, super lucky in my career. What's interesting is I report to the chief commercial officer at easyJet, who is also a working mother. And this is the first time in my career I've actually reported to another working mother. And it's been really, I mean, she's a great person, but it's also just been really wonderful to have someone who really gets kind of the pull that you feel, where, you love your career, you love what you do, you love your children, you love being a mother. So trying to find that balance and the importance of that.
Yeah, that is nice. Do you think that there aren't as many women leaders in the industry than there is male then, or do you think it's still even?
No, it's definitely not even. And especially, this is a kind of a STEM field. So, it's definitely lopsided towards men. And one of the things that I have found is that at the early levels of the career, it does seem mostly mixed, where you'll have about 50% women, 50% men. But as they move further up, the pool changes, it shifts somehow. And I don't think it's, I've always had really supportive line managers. So it's never been I don't think, a product of people trying to hold women back. I think just the systemic nature of the corporate world is harder for women. And so in readings I've done, women drop out of the workforce, or they'll change or scale back or something because the balance just doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
And so to me, I think that's what's really important, is supporting women early on and throughout their entire career, so that when they get to different aspects of their life, they can still do both.
And obviously you mentioned that you've had good bosses and things that have helped you and supported you when you need it as a working mum. Do you think that's the kind of best help that you could have got, or do you think there could be other resources or other things that could be implemented to help other working mums, to help make sure that they they all reach those leadership positions that you got the opportunity to do?
I think some of it is just, in general, I mean, I do feel that people have to take responsibility for their, their own career first and foremost. I mean, you can't just expect things to be given to you and things like that. But one of the things that I think is incredibly important is really the more women you get at all levels of the organization, just talking to younger women that I work with now, when they see other women that are older in those positions and they're doing, they see that, okay, I can have this life. It can work, I think is really important. So just, by increasing the numbers and the mix is super important. And then I think the other piece of it is, whether it's informal or formal, I think a lot of women respond really well to mentoring. Mm-hmm. and talking with women who are a little further along in their career and kind of getting lessons learned. I mean, I look back now on things I think now that, oh, I wish I would have known that 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And have you had a mentor then throughout kind of your career? Or?
I'm sorry, what?
Have you had a mentor like during your career that kind of helped coach you and been that support network as well?
Throughout my career, no, not really. I mean, again, it was a lot of just me taking, again, you got to take some responsibility for your own career. However, I feel like I really would have benefited from it. And that's something that when I look back, if 15 years ago, what would have really helped me, that would have been something that would have, because I would have looked at things a little differently. So some of the things that face a lot of women, imposter syndrome, that's a huge impediment to a lot of women. And, I've had to do a lot over the last few years and throughout my career to really overcome it, because we hold ourselves back. And there's this, I don't know the exact statistic, but there's something that, women will only apply to a job if they can check off some ridiculously high percentage of things they can do. And that absolutely was me. And so, had I kind of known that, I would have maybe looked at some opportunities and career movement a little different and been a little less hard on myself, probably.
Yeah, and also the exposure to things like imposter syndrome have grown, especially over the past couple of years.
Yeah,
you probably had those feelings and not even realised that there is kind of something that is called, and to be able to kind of seek advice on it and seek support and talk to people about it, because you just think they're just thoughts that are just random as well, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. You think, we always have a tendency to think that we're the only one going through a particular thing. And as it's become more of a thing people talk about, so many people have it to some degree, men and women. And it's totally normal. It's natural. And there's things that you can do to help.
Yeah. And I think it's important as well, hearing from a leader like yourself, hearing that all types of different people can suffer with that imposter syndrome, self-doubt, whatever it may be. You're not alone. Like you said, we often think that you think the only one thinking those thoughts, where it's just not the case.
Yeah, and just being aware that you have that these thoughts are in your head, like you said, being able to almost name it a little bit really makes a big difference in overcoming it, because you'll see it. You're like, oh yeah, and you can get past it, but it's always going to creep in from time to time. But it's you're not alone in it.
And do you think the networking that you have done, I know you mentioned kind of that was quite important in all the moves throughout your career that you've gained opportunities through it. Do you think that's helped things like imposter syndrome, or even just your knowledge in general, kind of being able to hear other people's opinions in the industry? Or what did you gain from networking as a whole, would you say?
Oh, the networking piece is absolutely critical, and has been a massive reason why I've gotten to where I've gotten in my career, for a variety of different reasons. Because, like I said, I have not really applied for a lot of jobs. I will have people, I've had people call me and hey, I've just moved to this job, or I know someone that's looking for this, you'd be great for it. So having a good reputation and then knowing a lot of people, your name's going to come up. The other thing too is, you know, to your point, there are people that understand your world, and so you can talk to them about different things, and you'll find that they're potentially facing the same things at work, the same challenges to a certain degree. So having that network also helps you become better. And, you know, again, you've got someone that you can talk to that actually gets it.
Yeah, it is important. I think that whole piece of you hear other challenges and other opportunities, and again, you don't feel alone, and you meet so many great contacts, and it is such a small world, as you mentioned earlier, that those contacts will be so important further down the line. You never know, that person that you meet could be a CEO of an amazing business that you want to work for in the future. You just never know, do you?
Yeah, and I'm at the point, you know, where I've been working long enough that, you know, people that I worked with in my 20s, some of them have really moved up in the airline industry and have, you know, fairly high level executive jobs. So, you know, again, when you are looking to get other positions and stuff, they know people too. So it's this exponential effect.
And if you're a proven fact that it works as well, because all of the jobs that, well, many of the jobs that you've got throughout your career have been because of that. So I think if anyone is struggling to get a new role or doesn't know where to start, then maybe networking is a great place as well. Do you think there have been any unique challenges that you faced throughout your career other than the things that we've mentioned?
It's a good question. Honestly, I don't think so. You know, I think a lot of the things that I've gone through have been, or not gone through, but that I've experienced have been fairly normal with what other people have had.
Yeah, no, yeah. And have there been any key achievements or any kind of milestones that spring to mind that you've hit that have really excelled your career, would you say? Or was there a moment that really took it to the next level?
There's been a few kind of key points in my career that I would say have taken it to the next level. I think my current job is a big one. You know, stepping to basically into that executive level, reporting into the C-suite. It takes a different, and it's a learning thing to go from being, it's less about subject matter expertise and more about leadership and strategy and working with all levels of the organization. So that was a big jump for me, and I'm just, you know, thoroughly loving it. So I think coming to easyJet has been a great thing. Also, I think another big leap, and it was not something that I had planned on, is, like I said at the very beginning, I was never going to leave where I grew up. And so making that first leap to, okay, I'm going to move to Texas, I was going to stay for a year. And 7 years later, it was a really big deal for me personally, because I lived for 18 years, you know, my parents, we didn't move or anything like that. I hadn't switched schools. I hadn't moved to a different house or city or anything. So that was a big step for me in my career, because it showed that I can do it, and that it worked out okay. So those would probably be two of the biggest ones.
You said that move was only supposed to be for a year and worked out, and then actually gave you that courage to continue doing it. And do you think there has been any women that have inspired you along your career, or kind of any stories that you've got to tell about other women?
One woman who I really admire is actually a very good friend of mine. And what I admire about her is just her absolute resilience. And she is someone who basically during COVID, she and her husband both lost their jobs. And, they're both very hardworking, good jobs. They had high level jobs. And, as you can imagine, COVID made things very difficult. She went and started her own marketing firm during COVID when, marketing spend was kind of, people were scaling back on that. And I always knew she could do well. She's very extroverted. She's really good at what she does. She's very creative and a great person to work with. But how her company has grown and has been just really impressive to me. And then honestly, how she's taken this too, and she's really formed it into something that works really well for her as well. So she gets to be her own boss. She gets to, work with clients and do things the way that she wants to do it, and have that work schedule that really works for her, while, making a living in a career that she loves and doing well with it. So she's someone that I truly, it was really just good to see how that's all emerged over the last few years.
Yeah. Taking that courage for a really difficult time to just take that leap of faith.
Absolutely. And it was just a leap of faith, and just kept plugging away at it. And, seeing where it is now is really, it's something she loves.
Amazing.
So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyone else that
I really have a lot of admiration for my current boss, Sophie Deckers, who's our chief commercial officer. She's been with the company a number of years, and she's worked at a variety of different functions throughout. So she just has this breadth of knowledge about easyJet and the industry, and just communicates that so well. And one of the things I really like about her is, she's very intelligent. She's very good at what she does, but she's also a wonderful person to work for and work with.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be an executive. You don't have to conform to this stereotypical ideal of what that means about being, hard on people. I mean, she's very much cares about her team and developing her team, and while also having an extremely important role within the company, and I really admire that.
And it's interesting that you say that, because I've spoken to people in the past and I've spoken about challenges maybe as a woman and how they get to leadership positions, and they've often said that, well, you need to show that you're strong if you're a woman in this industry, and you have to sit in that boardroom and show that strength and show that you know what you're talking about. And actually it's almost a shame to hear that, isn't it? Because you shouldn't have to act a certain way to prove that you're capable of doing a job that anyone else in that room is capable of doing as well.
And being strong and good at what you do doesn't mean, being
it comes across in different ways, doesn't it?
Or you can be you, basically. And that's I think something that, and I again, that's something that's really important to me too. As I get older, I don't want to pretend to be something or someone that I'm not. That's way too draining. So find a company or a job that allows you to be that, is just going to make
appreciates you for you.
Yes, appreciates you for you, your leadership style, and allow the people that work for you and around you to also be themselves.
You want to create this nice to work in environment where people can be themselves and work to the best of their capabilities, don't you?
Yeah.
And on that topic of, I guess, skills over that leaders may have learned, or that you've seen kind of those inspiring ladies that have learned, what skills do you think somebody needs to have or to learn or develop over their career to get to a leadership position like you have?
So it's, when you start out your career, it's not all about, but it's predominantly about learning your job and the subject matter expertise. So learning as much as you can about the job function. So if it's revenue management, learn about revenue management, become good at revenue management. The further along the more you get into your career, there's also this, there's subject matter expertise, then there's leadership and emotional intelligence. And the further up you get in your career, the more it's about emotional intelligence and your leadership capabilities as opposed to your subject matter expertise. So being able to me, being able to lead people, there's a little bit of letting go of your subject matter expertise. You still need to know what you're doing and the field that you're overseeing, but more about finding and developing really good people on your team, because the better your team is, the better you are and the happier you're going to be. So, hire, and don't be afraid to hire people that are smarter than you, and listen to what they have to say, because you can learn a lot from them, and ultimately, they're the ones that are closer to a lot of the things that are going on. So enabling them to make decisions and help come up with the solutions is most of the time going to be the better option than just dictating it.
Yeah, of course. And for anyone that might listen to this episode who maybe doesn't know much about hospitality or revenue management more specifically, what basic skills does somebody need to be able to enter this industry? Yeah. Obviously, with the aspiring to be where you are, but maybe when they're beginning, what do they need to have?
So if you want to go into revenue management specifically, in any of the very, if it's hotels, airlines, cruise lines, whatever, you have to have an analytical mindset. You're basically, your job is, you are using millions and millions of data points basically to try to figure out the situation and to assess what to do to maximize revenue. So you have to like data, you have to be comfortable with data, you have to be able to quickly ascertain what is important about the data and what actions you need to take because of it. Now, with that, like I said, there's also an art to it as well. So you have to, it's not about a formula that's going to crank out the right number. You have to be able to think creatively a little bit as well, and combine the math and the art behind it to come up with the best solution. You do have to be somewhat decisive, because you are making, if you think about it, like I said in the beginning, the team, we're on sale for, about a year in advance. We have, about 2,000 flights a day. There's hundreds of decisions that are being made across the course of the day. If you sit and just overanalyze every single one of them, you're going to go insane. So you have to be somewhat decisive, and then you have to go and look back and be willing to alter things, because you could come in and have the best strategy one day and a competitor came and did something and your whole strategy changes the next day. Or something's changed in the market. So adaptability. The other thing is curiosity and initiative. Curiosity to me is one of the most important things that I want in someone. Is I want them to look at something and be curious to continue to learn more. And it is a fine line. You don't want to go down a rabbit hole with something, but a lot of times you start out with a data set, you look at a situation, and you want to keep asking different questions to get to the answers and the action items. So you have to want to dig a little bit deeper. And the initiative piece is, and that's key in getting ahead in your career. When you're first starting out, obviously you need to be told what to do a little bit more as you're learning, but the more you're able to take initiative and find areas that you're the one solving the problem, the more you're going to be valued by your organization as someone who is, someone to move up and someone who just adds a lot of value.
Yeah, they're all really, really important.
Yeah,
definitely. And I know that I'm sure we'll get a lot of listeners on this episode in particular, not in the airline industry, because I talk to so many people outside of airlines that want to move into airlines, and it can be tricky. It can be difficult unless you start in airlines. It can be a little bit siloed still. What piece of advice would you give to those people if they really want to join airlines and they have got a bit of experience? What should they do? What would help them get into airlines? Is there a particular training that they can do? Are there particular qualifications that they can do? What would help them make that transition, do you think?
For someone who already has a revenue management background, depending on what stage you're at in your career, one thing to note is that if you go to the carrier's website, so maybe think of some carriers that you'd like to work for, a lot of times there's going to be revenue management positions out there, and apply for them. I mean, that's kind of basic job search. But, go to the airline website, and you will a lot of times find revenue management jobs, because it's and when we go through resumes, someone with revenue management experience is always going to kind of pop up.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would recommend is, if possible, do try to go to, there's a lot of conferences out there. And if you're able to attend, there's a lot of virtual conferences out there right now too.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get the networking as much. So, but, get to know people at an airline, and
Mm-hmm.
who can, again, it's all about the networking piece of it,
Yeah.
find someone in that field, or even at that airline that can help kind of get your foot in the door.
And are there any conferences that you would recommend that are kind of well known in the airline industry?
Yeah, there's a lot of them that kind of go across the different areas of hospitality. I know for Travel has, they'll have hotels, airlines, cruise lines, things like that. And there's the World Aviation Festival. You just have to Google it. I think there's loads of them that are out there that you can go to, and honestly, LinkedIn, you find, you're not always going to get a response from someone, but if I've had people reach out to me on LinkedIn that, hey, I have revenue management experience, I'm interested in getting in aviation, depending on where I'm at in my staffing levels and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I'll reach out. So
yeah, perfect. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess just to round off, I'm trying to end them all in a similar way. If there would be one piece of advice, what would you give to your younger self, or young women in the industry who are interested in pursuing a career within hospitality, not necessarily just revenue management? What do you think that bit of advice would be?
Let's see. To pursue a career in hospitality, so I think the first piece of it is get your foot in the door with a hospitality company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be
any way that it could be.
Exactly. Get
Mm-hmm.
your foot in the door with a company that does hospitality.
Yeah. Interestingly, at the round table I was at yesterday was with a load of holiday park companies, and they were talking about someone had been a lifeguard, somebody had been a waiter, someone had been a barman. It's really interesting to actually hear how people fall into revenue management.
Absolutely. And, other areas, again, that learning other areas outside of revenue management is always going to be a good thing for you. It's never going to be a bad thing for you to have that experience beyond revenue management. So, revenue management is, so much of it is about understanding customer demand. So if you've been in areas around the company, like you said, if you're a bartender at a hotel, well, who are you working with all the time? You're talking to the customers that are paying for your product. So you're learning that art piece of it as well.
Yeah, definitely. It just makes you learn just normal basic skills that you wouldn't get unless you're in that environment.
Yeah. Like, if you think about a flight attendant that's flown around the network, I mean, they're seeing who knows the customers better than anyone in the airline, that are working with hundreds of them every single day.
Absolutely. What an amazing job to have as well, by the way. But yeah, a really good bit of advice, and thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast today. I think I've loved personally hearing everything that you've got up to in your career and your tips and your advice and what's worked well for you and challenges and how you've overcome them. So yeah, really appreciate you coming on today. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.